My name is Thom, and I am the guest curator of the exhibition Challenging Traditions, Contemporary First Nations Art of the Northwest Coast, which is at the McMichael this summer. This is an exhibition which looks at 40 First Nations artists who live in British Columbia and one who lives in Seattle. Some artists chose to be represented by works that people don't normally think of them as being represented by. So, for example, Yeomans is represented by two rather extraordinary carvings, one of which is the talking stick, which is a traditional form, but his is completely untraditional because it has zoo animals like a giraffe on it. And he also is represented by this wonderful carving of a raven which is crucified on a Celtic cross. Again, completely untraditional, and those are the objects he wanted to be represented at, because for one thing, those objects had never been seen in an exhibition. There are objects such as the Robert Davidson large sculpture of the supernatural eye, which again is a completely untraditional form in that he's using aluminum, but he's obviously using an ovoid form in the eye, but he's having it developed in the three-dimensional space in a way that you don't see. Or an artist like McMichael Canadian, another Haida artist who produces what he calls Haida manga. And so they relate to sort of the cartoon traditions you see in Japan, but at the same time relates to traditional Haida forms. There's ovoid forms and curvilinear elements that you see in Haida art. Or you get a figure like Glenn Talio, who is from the Nutsalk Nation, who essentially is producing very, very traditional forms. But he came to carving very, very late in his life. He spent most of the early part of his career being an auto finisher, and he decided he needed to go back to traditional art forms, and has become one of the most accomplished mask carvers in British Columbia. And there's two wonderful masks of his here, both of which are objects that you would probably actually have danced with. Or there's an extraordinary group of dance masks by Henry Speck, the Kwakwaka'wakw artist, Hamatsa masks, cannibal bird masks, where you can see these. They have very long beaks, and the dancer would slap together, and they make an extraordinary noise. There's artists such as the Tlingit artist Preston Singletary, who's decided to turn traditional forms into glass, because he comes from Seattle and works with the Pilchuck people, the Pilchuck Glass Studios, and learned apprentices as a glassmaker with the Marioni family. So he takes traditional basket forms and turns them into glass baskets, which is again something that relates to tradition but is completely contemporary. You have other figures such as the Kwakwaka'wakw artist Sonny Asu, who describes himself as a green-eyed Indian. Who produced a wonderful drum called I Hamatsa Disconnected, which if you look at it carefully has his iPod bud in his ear to make sure that he's a person of the 20th century. And he also produced this wonderful work called Coke Salish, which uses the Coca-Cola logo and typeface to make a very strong statement about how he, as a Kwakwaka'wakw person, should make tribute to and ask permission to be on Coast Salish territory. So hence he's actually making a tribute to the Coast Salish, even as he's making a comment about consumerism and all those kinds of things that are obviously inherent in the Coca-Cola imagery. One of the things that's fascinating, I think, about what's happening in First Nations art now is how do you continue to make it relevant for the 21st century? How do you continue to make tradition work, and at the same time, be able to sort of change that tradition and move it forward? I mean, Robert Davidson's sculpture, Supernatural Eye, or his paintings, which are in the exhibition, are perfect examples of that. He refers to it as expanding the circle. If tradition is the circle, you want to make the tradition bigger. You want to make the pie bigger, as it were. And so there are more possibilities that you can work in. And one of the nice things about having it at McMichael is, of course, the fact that they do have some much, much older objects on display here. So so a visitor will be able to make the connections between the older objects and these much more contemporary objects. My name is Thom, and I'm the guest curator of the exhibition Challenging Traditions, Contemporary First Nations Art of the Northwest Coast, which is at the McMichael Canadian Art Collection this summer from June 27th to September 20th. Oh.